Hey everyone, we're Gianna, Hara, Maggie, and Harmony, and today we're diving into the topic we've all experienced in one way or another in our relationships, the honeymoon phase.
That early stage in a relationship when everything feels new and exciting, and it's like you're living in a rom-com. Your partner can do no wrong, and everything just feels perfect.
But here's the thing. What happens when that phase fades? Does a relationship go downhill or is it just part of the process? In today's episode, we're talking about what the honeymoon phase actually is, how long it lasts, and why it's so important to understand.
We'll also dive into the impact it has on long-term relationships, why communication is key during this phase, and how couples can set themselves up for success once the initial excitement wears off.
So, if you've ever wondered if the honeymoon phase is just a phase or if it's the start of something more, stick around. We're going to unpack all of that, plus a little research on how cultural differences affect the way people experience it.
After listening to this podcast, you'll understand a little bit better how to identify what the honeymoon phase is and how long it lasts, how communication works both during and after this phase, some theories on the impact of the honeymoon phase, and exactly why it and these findings are so important.
So without further ado, grab a seat, get comfortable, and let's talk about what love happens after the butterflies fade away.
So, what is the honeymoon phase exactly? I'm sure everyone has heard about this, even maybe experienced it in previous or current relationships. It is the early stage of a romantic relationship where everything feels new, exciting, positive, and even perfect, and you get like that head over heels feeling.
Yeah, during this, people tend to overlook the red flags that are usually pointed out before getting into a relationship. I was reading a Forbes article about the stages of a relationship, which broke down the stages, which I found really interesting. There are five stages in total, and they range from the first 6 months of the relationship to beyond 5 years.
Oh, so the honeymoon phase can look a lot different in different relationships. I wonder how that would change the outcome of the relationship as a whole.
Yeah, I think that's the amount of time spent in the honeymoon phase can definitely have an effect on the way the couple's able to communicate outside of the honeymoon phase. We're going to talk about later in the podcast some of the problems that can arise when the phase ends and how they can often cause the end of relationships. And I think that a couple that spends much longer in a carefree relationship may be in for a bit more of a surprise when that time ends. That's why in the end, it's all about balance.
That was very well said, and a great way to lead into talking about the challenges that come with a relationship post-honeymoon phase. One of the biggest hurdles, without a doubt, is communication. During the honeymoon phase, everything feels easy and communication tends to be idealized. Lots of positivity, emotional connection, and good vibes all around. But here's the thing, that smooth communication can sometimes mask issues that might pop up later. So, how exactly does communication play a role in keeping the relationship strong?
I think it's easy to coast on those good vibes when things are going well, but the real challenge comes when those hidden issues start to show up. That's when communication becomes crucial.
Yeah, early on, partners tend to like focus on each other's strengths and overlook the flaws, and this creates like the atmosphere that reinforces their bond. But I feel like this communication can mask underlying issues that could possibly be brought up at like later times in their relationship. And couples should definitely navigate shifting dynamics, which can make it a priority to establish strong communication habits earlier on in the relationships and even create this open dialogue during this phase so partners can better prepare for future challenges and even maintain those healthy balances of cost and benefits.
Yeah, exactly. I read an article called When the Honeymoon is Over, A Theory of Relationship Liabilities and Evolutionary Process, which compares romantic relationships to business partnerships. In both cases, you start off with a lot of optimism, but flaws eventually become more noticeable. And so, if communication isn't handled well, misunderstandings and trust issues will arise.
Yeah, I love that analogy. It's like in business, you start with a shared vision, but if you don't keep communicating, problems can fester. It's the same thing in relationships.
Absolutely. The article emphasizes that while the honeymoon phase is full of positive energy, couples should establish strong communication habits early on. By creating open dialogue now, partners can better prepare for future challenges and maintain a healthy balance as the relationships evolve. It's not just about keeping things light, it's more about laying the foundation for lasting trust and understanding.
Yeah, definitely. Because when the honeymoon phase fades away, you don't want to be like caught off guard or anything. You definitely need to know how to communicate openly about the tougher stuff too.
Right. So my advice would be to not just rely on the initial spark. Take the time to talk about your expectations, boundaries, and concerns. The better you communicate now, the stronger your relationship will be when the honeymoon phase fades.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Communication isn't just for when things are tough, it's something to work on from the beginning. Even on first dates, it's not uncommon to lay out what you expect in terms of things like marriage and children. Those are pretty common, first date questions, talking about, important milestones and things like that. And it doesn't have to be just that, it's really about asking what's important to you, especially if it's something that could lead to a conflict later. It's important. Uh, it might seem a little overzealous, but it's good to get that out there from the beginning.
Yeah, totally. I mean, obviously, like you don't have to bare your entire like soul the first time you meet on these dates and everything, but it's good to at least like start getting those important questions out and expectations out earlier, and setting up those healthy habits early on can make navigating the challenging moments so much easier down the road.
I completely agree. And it helps build that trust, which once again is the foundation of any relationship. So now we're going to discuss theories on this topic. Since the honeymoon phase is literally a phase, it's supposed to come to an end at some point. However, I think our generation has the idea that the honeymoon phase isn't actually supposed to end.
Oh, that's an interesting point of view, actually.
Yeah, so I asked some student athletes for their thoughts on the matter, and they feel like the initial feeling of love and excitement should be infinite in a relationship. And if it goes away, it's actually a bad thing. They said things like the honeymoon phase should never end, and if the honeymoon phase ends, you're doing something wrong. They didn't see the honeymoon phase as a building block to building a deeper connection and understanding of their partner in the future, or that initial head over heels feeling that Gianna mentioned in the beginning.
Yeah, that makes actually a lot of sense. It sounds like they perceive it as something like pretty constant in the relationship.
Exactly. Like an everlasting feeling of new, exciting, perfect, and infatuated, like you said again earlier. Their point of view actually led to a theory that explains one of the reasons why our generation is so bad at relationships. Because some people our age go into relationships with this unrealistic expectation of a forever honeymoon phase. When it ends like it's supposed to, they think that the relationship just wasn't meant to be.
Yeah, I think that that's a really important aspect to recognize. Our generation romanticizes the honeymoon phase, so they often feel like something in the relationship is broken, when in reality, it's just the relationship being normal.
Actually, now that I think about it, there's another theory that we've learned about that I think ties in really well with this, the social exchange theory. It's like a mix of sociology and psychology that explains how we interact with others by weighing the cost and benefits of our actions. So, like for example, in the honeymoon phase of a relationship, partners tend to feel more attraction, affection, and intimacy, which are like the rewards that come with it.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I feel like the stage can be seen as idealization and like the perception that the relationship offers more benefits than costs, and that strong emotional bond as the partners invest in each other. And I feel like they can see their relationship as like fulfilling the needs for companionship and validation.
So yeah, that's how the phase being temporary can cause problems to arise. Because when it's over, that's when the individuals have to start thinking over, the rewards and costs. And if the costs that come with a relationship start to outweigh the rewards, the dynamics of the relationship can shift. And that's when maybe you realize you don't like them as much as you thought you did. And that's what makes social exchange theory so important.
Absolutely. Those are all such great points. There's also an article called Are We Still in Love? Navigating Romance After the Honeymoon. And it explains the honeymoon phase as the point in the relationship where people are getting to know each other. And when that new and exciting feeling starts to fade, it's a chance to increase the intimacy and understanding of their partner. I think if our generation could grasp this concept, they might have more success in establishing actual, real, healthy relationships.
Yeah, definitely. I think that everything we've talked about so far has been really great. But I think most importantly, what we should talk about is why does any of this matter? How do the theories of communication we've talked about really help us to understand how to navigate relationships in and out of the honeymoon phase? And why is it something we should really, be concerned about and thinking about?
I think what makes the theories of communication so relevant to understanding the honeymoon phase are the rates of relationships ending when the phase does as well. According to a study done by researchers at Stanford University, about 70% of straight couples break up within the first year. To me, this shows most couples can't survive once the honeymoon phase is over.
Yeah, that's a very logical conclusion. There's also a study done by Gretchen Kelmer, Delina K. Rhodes, Scott Stanley, and Howard J. Markman called Relationship Quality, Commitment, and Stability in Long Distance Relationships that says that 40% of long distance relationships end with a breakup. In my opinion, it sounds like those relationships also can't last outside of the honeymoon phase, as being separated from your partner is likely much harder than at the beginning when you could be together and when things are easier.
Yeah, yeah. It shows that a lot of couples are in it for the good times, but they can't really withstand hard times together. On kind of a similar note, 80% of relationships end when one partner cheats on the other, according to a study I read called Outcomes of Couples with Infidelity in a Community-Based Sample of Couple Therapy. That's obviously a much more extreme hard time, someone cheating or being cheated on, but it's just another example of relationships falling apart due to conflict that comes when you're no longer in the honeymoon phase.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think like all those statistics are subsequent to the honeymoon phase ending, like we said earlier in the podcast and throughout. And I feel like it's possible that our generation has been led to believe that the honeymoon phase is like it should last the entire relationship. So when partners like feel it coming to an end, they feel like the relationship is also coming to the end.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So, do you think that young couples view hardships in their relationship as like the sign of the end rather than a hurdle to get through together?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's not that to say that anyone should stay with someone that they're unhappy with or like who did something that they viewed as like unforgivable as like cheating, but it shows that a lot of people are in the relationship like the fun parts because they aren't in it for the long run.
Yeah, I think what we really need to discuss then, what the big question is, why is the honeymoon phase only a phase? Why does it have to end? Why do the fun parts not last? Why aren't relationships able just to be great from the beginning and endlessly? Isn't that supposed to be, what love is when you like each other so much? Shouldn't you be able to just be happy together? Why not?
Yeah, I think you should definitely be able to be happy together, and love is great. It's a part of your relationship, but it's unrealistic to assume that a relationship will always be sunshine and rainbows. There's going to be some ups and downs, and sometimes you're going to have to be there for each other to pick yourself back up to that good place. So it just takes hard work.
Yeah, no, I think that's really what love is about. Not everything is always being perfect and like Harmony said, like sunshine and rainbows, but being able to get through the challenges together.
Yeah, like I would say the honeymoon phase is pretty easy. Like true love is being able to make it outside of the honeymoon phase, even when it's not so easy afterwards, because you definitely want to do it with that person, even if it is hard.
Yeah, so what we're really saying is couples that can't survive outside of the honeymoon phase, who can't make it when things aren't just happy and fun and nice, those couples were never really meant to last at all.
I can see that. Draven Porter makes a great point in his article. During the honeymoon phase, partners are naturally close and open with each other, but over time things shift and that's when challenges arise. That's where adjusting communication styles become key to keeping the relationship strong. The real test is whether they can evolve together, working through those challenges, not just learning about each other, but actually learning how to navigate life as a team, really.
Yeah, that's a great point. So now we're going to do a little Q&A. I want to start by asking you, Hera, how much do you think the media and pop culture influence our expectations of the honeymoon phase?
I think it definitely shapes our expectations of the honeymoon phase by making us think that the honeymoon phase should last forever. But in reality, relationships need effort, like we were all saying before, like quality time and communication to keep the spark alive once that phase ends. And actually, Harmony, I have a question for you next. According to research by Acevedo, author of After the Honeymoon, maintaining romance after the honeymoon phase involves intentional efforts like prioritizing quality time, embracing vulnerability, and communicating openly. But based on these strategies, what's one thing you would personally focus on to keep the spark alive in a long-term relationship?
Yeah, I think one way to really maintain just being intentional with your partner is check-ins. It's a great way to see if both partners are on the same page, whether it's once a week or monthly, just asking your partner, hey, do you feel like we've been spending enough quality time together? Or, hey, how can we improve our communication? Just being open and honest about how both people are feeling, it will go a long way. If both people continue to be intentional and are putting in consistent effort to make the other person feel seen and heard, that spark will definitely relight.
I have a question for Gianna. How do you think couples can maintain excitement and passion after the honeymoon fades away? So, not just beyond just maintaining the relationship in general, how can you keep being you feeling excited and passionate beyond just base level? What tips do you have for keeping a relationship really, truly healthy beyond this phase?
Yeah, I would say like prioritizing quality time together. I feel like just doing fun things that the couple both enjoys, like going to the movies or like to a park or going out to eat. I also think like keeping communication open and honest. I feel like that's definitely the biggest one. And also like Harmony mentioned, checking up on one another, just like asking if they're okay, and just being overall like honest and keeping things positive for one another.
Yeah, and if I might add something, Gianna, I actually really like your point that you just made. I'd also say trying new things together, like exploring a new place or trying a new hobby to keep things fresh and being open and honest with each other really helps keep the connection strong that I've seen. And as Gianna, you mentioned, checking up on one another from time to time and letting your partner know you're always there for them really goes a long way.
Yeah, definitely. I really like the trying different things because I feel like it's great to like branch out instead of like stick with the prior stuff couples usually do. So that's a good one. Maggie, I have a question for you. Do you think that the honeymoon phase is like truly a phase or like can it last longer for some couples? And like for those couples like that experience, can they experience the honeymoon phase as like an extended phase or like is it inevitable that it just goes away?
Yeah, I think for many couples, the honeymoon phase does eventually fade. I think there's always going to be the most excitement at the beginning of the relationship because it's new, but it's not necessarily the end of excitement, passion, or happiness in the relationship altogether. It's just, it might look different for some, and that's okay. You are settled and you're used to each other by this point, so it's not the same as when you're getting used when you're meeting each other and getting to know each other, but now instead you're growing together and sharing experiences and prioritizing each other as the relationship goes on.
So Maggie, my next question is also for you. I remember you mentioned earlier that a lot of people think the honeymoon phase should last forever. So do you think couples can adjust their expectations and like embrace the changes that come after that initial excitement fades?
Yeah, as the initial excitement of a relationship fades, couples can adjust their expectations by shifting from the idealizing the early stages to embracing that deeper emotional intimacy that develops over time. Instead of expecting the relationship to always feel thrilling. You should embrace the fact that you're comfortable with each other, and they should focus on building a form of trust, communication, and mutual support. That's honestly, that's the best part of being in a relationship, growing um, comfortable with one another and not just always feeling excited.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. That's a really good one. So, yeah, we're at the end of our podcast. We really hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully you learned something new and can definitely like apply it to your romantic relationships.
Yeah, the honeymoon phase is fun, but it's also just the beginning. As I've mentioned throughout this podcast, it's the foundation where communication habits are formed. The real strength of a relationship shows when the initial excitement fades and partners must adapt and grow together and build a stronger connection.
Hmm. Love doesn't just stop once the butterflies fade. It's about building a deeper bond where you can be open, honest, and real with each other. The key is facing challenges together, communicating openly, and continuously growing as partners.
Thanks for tuning in. Remember, the sooner you set those communication habits in place, the better prepared you'll be for the ups and downs that come as your relationship evolves. So until next time, keep communicating and stay connected. Bye.